Welcome to the CIO Evolution. In this podcast, we'll explore the Chief Information Officer's role in executing a new ongoing leadership imperative, digital transformation that promotes agility and resilience. How do CIOs upgrade legacy networks? What are the financial challenges CIOs face? And what are the security measures that are required in the new work from anywhere, mobile and cloud-based world?
Welcome to the show. I'm Chris Jablonski, your host and Director of CXO Revolutionaries and Community. In episode 39, Bruce Lee, CXO advisor and former CIO and CTO of top companies, shared with us stories of innovation inspired by the Three Horizons model from the timeless book, The Alchemy of Growth. In part 2, we get into how Zero Trust helped Bruce in his previous roles to innovate securely.
Zero Trust. When you think about the companies you've helped deploy it at, what comes to mind in terms of how it helped the innovation agenda?
It's really about having an answer to how you can make those connections quickly and safely without having to go through the complete interconnection of those partners or companies and exposing their full network to each other. Zero Trust in all its different forms and names over time. So not specifically talking about the physical instantiation of Zero Trust in, say, Zscaler's broker infrastructure, security broker infrastructure, but just the concept that you're giving only as much access as necessary, only at the time it's needed, only to the people that need it. I think that has certainly something that's come to dominate the thinking of CISOs and CIOs in the last 5 years. Before that, I remember when we were acquiring companies at Centene, we would build in a 6-month delay to connecting the systems in order to do the security review and penetration test and everything else before we connected the two wires together. Now they want those connections in 6 hours, not in 6 months. And you can only do that with Zero Trust and that kind of thinking. So I think it's instrumental when you think about what I said earlier, that change and innovation increasingly is a partnership model. And that partnership model is across all different levels of corporation, not all big, Fortune 50s with all their security in the right place at the right time, you hope, but all sorts of different partners, community partners, government partners, different countries in different geopolitical risk contexts. You think about all of that, the only way you're going to be able to build those value chains is if you're limiting very, very deliberately the amount of access to data and to systems and knowledge about each other's companies as you can. So I think what was a good idea to speed up agility has now become a must-have for anyone trying to innovate and grow.
Got it. So then what you're left with, if I heard you correctly, you have an ecosystem of partners and players that are going to be pretty much the keys to growth and innovation. No company is really going to do it by itself. At the same time, you need to control that access across your third parties, across this value chain, which then means you have friction, because friction is the only way to get what is needed, which is access control, and done granularly and done correctly. So this raises the question of user experience. What are some of the considerations for a CIO, CTO looking to find this balance between access, agility, and speed and security to ensure that all this scaling doesn't compromise the quality of service and impact end user experience?
I think it's a very real risk. As a CIO, you used to control almost everything in the value chain. If, for example, a user screen was glitching and hanging, it was most probably your server on the other end of it not supplying the result to that drop-down box or that next step in the process frame, and you could deal with both ends of that. Now that other end is in another company, in another country, in another data stack, in another infrastructure, and you're just making an API call to it, that user experience now requires levels of transparency and visibility and orchestration and instrumentation that we've never seen before. Um, we used to be able to say 97% of all the meetings went well. You know, now everyone wants to know why the 3% of meetings had a glitchy audio or a bad this or something that, right? So constantly you're in this new model of distributed partnerships and everything. People still expect not only what they had before, but I think they have a higher expectation now. Not to use all the cliches, but driven by the Netflixes and the AWSs and everything else. They just want it all to work, and so um, I think insights into that network that you've built. Obviously, ZDX comes to mind in a Zscaler context, but there are lots of different parts of that network for looking at it across the world. Um, it makes a difference. And just to be current, we saw that just over the last couple of weeks, right? I mean, with the CrowdStrike and then following that on the Monday, the Microsoft issues. These are not your entire data center in many cases. They're just one part of a value chain that was supplying something from some third party that was part of your value chain. And you're having to explain to your users why something out of your control is impacting that. Well, first of all, you got to know it. That's your visibility. Then you got to work out if it's going to recover. Are there any alternatives? Have you built your system to be resilient to all of that? So lots and lots of questions. So end user experience is the thing you have to pay attention to as you're bolting together all these innovative stacks of partnerships to deliver experience. Because at the end of the day, it's your users that are having the experience. So that's where you got to go.
Yeah. And before, the equation that defined end user experience, I don't know if it appreciated resilience as much as they may now, as we have more and more examples of these disruptions, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's an emerging um, uh, thing. The other practice that's really coming to light now, and I wish I'd seen more of it in the light of the CrowdStrike thing, is you don't release one update to the whole world all at once. It's like even if you've got 10 years of doing it seamlessly and perfectly, never do that. Always phase the release. Always, I hate to say it, but that release should have disrupted people in Asia, and it should have been stopped by the time the US woke up. So I think all of these things, all of these resilience practices, release management, quality control, we're all being pushed to make those better and better because so many things interconnect. So many things are now, sharing common infrastructure. I guess that's what a couple of decades of standards and the internet has brought us. We are all interconnected, which was the plan.
Yeah. Well, it's an expensive lesson learned, but one that is definitely going to help, hopefully, entire industries and ecosystems.
I just remember you just prompted a thought there, Chris. I was on some calls with Microsoft about 5 years ago, and they were explaining how they built the world to be able to only do releases in certain what they call rings of customers. And indeed they had, but what they hadn't got was an ability to stop it once they'd started. And so it's like each time we invent something new, we solve one set of problems and we create the next set of problems. It's how quickly you solve those next set of problems that creates the next set of problems that gets us where we are. But that's also innovation, right? Constantly solving problems is innovation. And again, you can use that model across the three horizons as well. Again, it's why I like it because it just enables you to talk about this stuff in such a useful way.
Yeah, I guess somewhere in your strategy deck, you need to have a line item for how to deal with unintended adverse consequences, right? Fascinating. So we're going to start zooming back out, Bruce. Had a couple more questions. You've had so much experience and you bring so much great knowledge to the show here. When you think about the importance of being future ready and anticipating those demands, are there any tools or strategies that you know of that can help technology leaders forecast and plan for change and plan for disruption?
Yeah, I mean, not to be glib about it, but the one that usually doesn't work is we need to be future ready. Give me $100 million. That usually doesn't work because it's seen in isolation from all the activities the company is already pursuing. So I think the strategy to future proofing is to be looking for the opportunities that exist within the existing work streams the company's involved in to increase the capabilities that you have to meet what you know will be future demand. So a good example is if you're coming up on an end of a subscription or other contract service with something that's entirely on-prem, hard to scale and everything else, rather than doubling down on what you've already got, you might, quite reasonably take the change risk and the change cost to replace that piece of infrastructure with something that is scalable, will support zero trust, will do whatever. It's not about finding the next shiny object. It's about finding uh, core infrastructures that have the capabilities to deal with this scaling problem, growth problem, security problem that you're going to be faced with. So my first piece of advice is know your current state, know your infrastructure, know where you've got limitations in those capabilities, look at your reinvestment cycles, look at opportunities in projects that are going on to try and make those upgrades and those replacements and those expansions just part of what you do. And if anyone wants to ask you why you're doing it or why you're taking that change risk, you've got an answer, which is, I know you're going to bring me a problem you'll want me to solve soon, and this is the only way I can do it. And I'm getting rid of an on-prem constraint. I'm getting rid of an on-prem cost, even at some level. So these are things to really think about how future proofing is what your upgrade and your project cycle should be delivering as a byproduct of the work you have to do. There will be times if you've fallen behind dramatically, if you're 10 years off the tech, if you've just had a massive security issue, if you've got a capacity problem that's killing the business, you'll get your dollars and you'll get your upgrade chances. But those are more the exception than the rule. And as most companies, you want to be in the swing of just moving the company forward and anticipating those innovation demands by the technologies you choose along the way. Because it's too late once the demand hits you. That's when you get stuck. So yeah, that's my initial thought, Chris.
So, having held the roles of CIO and CTO, is there anything to add on top of what you just said in terms of how those two roles could partner better and to extend it to the CISO? Like, how do you get a triad that can work better together to accomplish those things that you just said? And I know it's going to depend on situation, industry, org size, where you're at in your company life cycle, but any observations there that you could impart?
Yeah, I think all of the three C's you mentioned there, the CISO, the CTO, the CIO, if you're in a company big enough to have all three, sometimes it's just one person has all those three roles. But what helps, I think, in that is a little bit of humility amongst the team. Because one thing I've always said to my teams is every decision we're going to make together is going to be wrong eventually, right? And it may not be wrong today, but 2 years from now, someone's going to come along with the next best thing that makes what we did back then look so dumb that, why aren't we doing it this way? So I think you've got to have some humility to know that you're making decisions for a period of time that are the best set of decisions you can make at that time. But something new will come along, and that new thing may come from any quarter. As I said, everybody's involved in innovation. That innovation can come from the most junior system manager on your team or the most junior DBA or something that will lead you to conclude we shouldn't have bought product X, we should have bought product Y. We shouldn't have gone into this relationship, we should have gone into that relationship. So I think that the C team needs to know they're making the best decisions they can make at the time, not the decision that will be right forever. And that requires you to be willing to give up on what you previously chose or previously supported when something better comes along. SD-WAN is a good example, of networking. People were diehards on needing to preserve the corporate WAN when really local breakout to the internet, it was faster, it was more reliable, it was more secure, it was cheaper. But you wouldn't hear that from, the network teams. The network teams, it's got to be WAN and we need those connections because that's what they've known. And as CTOs and CIOs, you need that humility to say, I hear you, but it's time to change. It's time to do something new. Um, because 15 years ago you were right. Today I'm not so sure, and that's okay. It's not that you're an idiot now and you were a genius then. It's that the world around us has changed. I know I'm waffling a little bit here, Chris, but I really do believe this is something that people have to um, embrace if they're really going to be open to the innovation that their teams can bring them in Horizon One. It doesn't always just come from the users demanding of IT. IT itself is an innovation engine, and there's a lot of Horizon One and even Horizon Two innovation in IT that, as a C executive in that space, you've got to be willing to listen to.
Yeah. I think you've just opened up like the true challenge of aligning a group responsible for so much, right? To make decisions that can solve the problems of the future, which is a very abstract thing to
Yeah.
solve for. So
Well,
definitely,
it's actually one of the core things that I think is happening now in technology teams is that people are really struggling with the concept that security and networking are the same.
right.
They've been different for so long and they've been separate teams for so long, and the lines between them have been so well drawn that this zero trust security broking kind of environment with the connection of all these different data sets and execution venues into the value chain. Like I hate to use that old Sun thing, but the network is the computer or whatever they used to say. And that network has to be secure. So I think right now, one of the things that those three CTOs, CIOs, and CISOs really need to be thinking about is how their disciplines are merging into the new, let's call it secure networking, for want
Yeah.
of a better word, that is really the dominant solution set, I think, for that flexibility and that future that we've been talking about.
And if we were betting on that happening, I would be right behind you because I've seen this happen many times over and being in the industry for, a couple decades myself, where the MarTech stack definitely consolidated. The topic for CIOs, 10, 15 years ago is service-oriented architectures, distributed computing, things that we've just take for granted now are just completely subsumed into other technologies, never to be spoken of again, right? I think it's
Exactly.
happening over and over.
Yeah.
Last question for you, Bruce. So how would you sum up your career and like what really drives you professionally? And then somewhere in there, maybe you could add what it's what do you do as a Zscaler CXO advisor?
Having only started in this advisor role a week ago, I'm kind of
Okay.
learning what I do as a CXO advisor. But I think my job is to help the teams out there solve problems and help their customers solve problems by bringing some perspective to the challenge of change and everything. Um, but I would sum up my career actually saying it's really been about curiosity. Curiosity about people, curiosity about technology, curiosity about business models, curiosity to solve problems and introduce change. So I've been very lucky. I've been at the forefront of a lot of tech and business innovation, things that have changed whole industries. People take it for granted that they can get a mortgage quote on their phone. That was 3 years of really hard data grinding, connections, reworking the networks at Fannie Mae to be able to, let banks know that they could give you a mortgage quote, knowing that Fannie Mae would buy the loan from them. But you had to be curious to, could it be different? How could it be different? What could we do to make that different? What would we need to know to make that happen? So curiosity, new ways of doing things, that's really been everything that I've enjoyed doing. And I hope it's what I can continue to do as a CXO advisor, listening to the challenges the teams face, the challenges the customers face, and trying to bring some, hopefully collaboration to solve those challenges.
That's a great way to end the episode. Thank you so much for your time, Bruce. We're lucky to have you, lucky to have your perspectives. And I look forward to personally working with you on more content for CXO Revolutionaries.
Absolutely, Chris. It's been my pleasure. Thanks. Have a great day.
Thank you. We've been listening to Bruce Lee, a former CIO and CTO of blue chip companies, and now a CXO advisor at Zscaler.
Thanks for listening to the CIO Evolution. Check back with your podcast provider regularly for more episodes. You can find more episodes along with other podcasts on the CXO Revolutionaries website at revolutionaries.zscaler.com. Statements by Zscaler podcasters and guests are informational only and should never be construed as legal advice. You should consult your legal advisor on matters related to you or your business. Zscaler makes no warranties, express, implied, or statutory as to the content of this podcast, and it is provided as is. Content on this podcast may contain forward-looking statements that are current as of the date of the recording and subject to change. These statements are subject to the safe harbor provisions created by the Private Securities Litigation Reform Act of 1995. Full legal disclaimers are available at revolutionaries.zscaler.com. Copyright 2021.